Hello, my creative friends. We're going to do another draw along tonight. Tonight I'm going to be using watercolor and doing these sweet little Valentine kitties. Now, for those of you who'd like to have a little help drawing, I do have a Ko-fi membership. That's where I have all of my tracers. So you can pop over there. It's reasonably priced. The link will be down inside of the description box. So you can pick up a tracer for this little kitty project. So I'm going to be working in watercolor. I'm going to be using the Canson watercolor paper. It's one of my favorites, the 140-pound weight. It's a student grade, so it means it's reasonably priced. So it makes practicing and just doing watercolor, but you can still get a really nice look with this watercolor paper. Now I already have mine traced and ready to go. So let's go ahead and start with our watercolor. Now, if you're not familiar with watercolor comes in a variety of prices. So I always say just spend a tiny bit more on your paper, which that's why I buy the Canson brand. It's not that expensive, and just buy the watercolor that you can afford, because it all comes in different price ranges. I'm going to be using two sets tonight. I'm going to be using the Paul Rubin brand that I have, and I'm going to be using this little inexpensive one. And the reason why is because it has some colors in here, some pinks that I really like. It has a little bit of white in there, so probably a little bit of gouache into those colors. And I don't have those colors inside of my other set, so I'm going to be using the combination of two. Tonight I'm going to be using the Velvet Touch Princeton brushes. These are a great watercolor brush, and they're pretty reasonably priced, and I believe I got these at Michael's, and they'll last you a long time when you're using watercolor. They've got a nice little point on them, which is great when doing these little small drawings, because when you go in, that point and that tip of your brush is going to bounce right back, and it's going to be a great brush to paint with. So I'm going to be using those two round brushes to start with. Now, these little kitties have little sweaters on them. Aren't they as cute as can be? They have that very whimsical look. If you're new to my channel, I love whimsical, and that's what I like to do a lot of. So this little Valentine kitties suit me really well, and I love doing kitties too. So this the drawing part, if you get a tracer, do it in your favorite colors, and I'm going to be doing some basic traditional colors for my kitties. I'm going to start with their little faces here, and I chose to do gray on my one little kitty, so I'm just going to choose this gray. I wet my color palette just to loosen up my colors. And with watercolor, you always start with your light and bright and then work your way dark. You usually always want to have a paper towel or a cloth in your hand to be able to dab as you need to do to control the water of your watercolor. So let's see if you can see kind of here. I'm going to choose this gray here. Watercolor dries slightly lighter. I'm going to come in here, give this a tap, and then I'm going to layer in some spots on this little kitty. I made this kitty a gray kitty. So I'm going to start light and then work my way dark. Now I can also leave a little bit of white showing in this area. Those are going to be my lightest, brightest colors. I can always fill them in if I want to darken it up a little bit. I can always add that. I'm going to add just a tiny bit, a spot over here to give that kitty a little bit of spot on her face. And I'm going to make some little tiger stripes on her tail. And as this dries, I'm going to be adding another layer of color of the gray on there. So this is my first shade of gray, and then I'll be working into my next shade of gray. I'm going to let this dry a little bit before I do that, and then I'm going to be adding them on. I'm just going to give her a little gray pause right here, just on the tips, and we'll see how that dries out. Now with watercolor, I don't want to go in right next to where my area is wet, because if I do that, watercolor always flows where your paper is wet. So you need to give it a chance to dry somewhat, so when you work next to your color, otherwise it's going to flow right into your next color. So I'm going to bump over to this little kitty here, and I decided to make her kind of an orange kitty, little bit of ginger kitty on this side. And I'm going to start with a little bit of this goldish color, and I'm going to tap a little bit of this color in. Now I'm going to be deepening these little ginger kitty colors, and I'm going to be adding a little bit darker orange, and then I'm going to be adding a little bit of burnt sienna on there too, on her, just to warm her little color up, her little ginger color. And I'm going to do the same thing about adding some little tiger stripes. And I'm just tapping with the end of my brush is what I'm doing. So I'm just basically using the small little tip of my brush and coming in and making these little strokes. Let's add a little bit of little spottedness down here. So I'm going to add a little bit more color to Ginger Kitty and a little less color to that one. Let's see. And the reason why I made her sweater purple is because purple and yellow are complementary colors and they're just going to pop next to each other. So I decided I would make her sweater a little bit orange. Okay, so we'll let that dry. Now, this one has had plenty of time to dry. These dry fairly quick. This paper doesn't have a lot of cotton in it, so it's going to dry quicker than what a cotton paper would. I'm going to come over here. This time, perhaps add a little less water, and I'm just going to tap in another shade of that gray. So you can see how my color is going to darken. So if you kind of figure when you're doing watercolor, you're basically coloring the shadows is what you're doing. So you want to leave some of that first color showing through. I'm going to add that darker color here. I'm going to add a little bit more pigment this time to the tail to make it darker. So I'm adding less water to my color when I'm laying it in this time to make a darker color, a darker version of this color. I'm going to take this too and add just a little bit more. On the face, I kind of used the same amount of water because I didn't want to go too dark up there. But down here, I know I want it to be a little bit darker, so I added less water and more pigment. Again, I'm still kind of just using the tip of my brush and adding that on there. Okay, we're going to let that dry. Now let's pop over and add a little bit more orange to Ginger Kitty. So we're going down on my color range. So I started here. I'm going to come down a little bit more and add a little bit more of the orange color. So I'm going to be tapping this into, not trying to cover up all that bright yellow that I had on the face. But I don't want it to feel polka dotty either. So I'm going to be blending my colors with a little bit of burnt sienna over the top to tone them down. She's kind of bright right now, but I want to be able to tone it down. I'm using about the same amount of water with my orange color is what I did with my yellow. So it's about the same tone is what I'm using. Not as strong as some of my gray that I used over here. I'm going to be popping in a very light shade of gray next to my onto my next kitty face over here. Okay, so we have the little orange in. She's looking very gingery. If you have a little ginger kitty and you want to leave a comment of what your ginger kitty's name is, I'd love to know what it is. Or if you have a little gray and white kitty. I have two kitties. I have a gray, white, and black kitty, Mr. Milo, and he's, they're both big boys. And I have Mr. Milo is my tiger kitty. I'm not for sure what you call that, but he's my tiger kitty. And then Mr. Otis, he is kind of, I just call him a farm kitty. He's just a mix of all kinds of colors. Now this one I am really watering down. I'm not sure if I'm in the camera with that. I'm really watering it down because I'm going to be adding that to the white part of just adding a hint of color. So I don't want it to be all solid. So I'm adding just a really watered down version of my gray and softening up my white. I'm going to come in and do that here too in his tail. So I don't have such a contrast of dark and white. Now you can come in and add a little bit of water to that darker pigment, which I think would look good to soften it just a little bit. So it doesn't look so harsh. My lines don't look too polka dotty. Adding a little bit more of that color and softening it. That's the one thing about watercolor. It's not a permanent paint. So you do get the option of lifting your color. So if you put it on and you decide you wanted to lift it or lighten it, you can come in with just clean water and push that around a little bit or tickle the edge. Like if I wanted to make sure my edges were really perfect here, I could, or more, as perfect as I could get them, I could come in with clean water and then tickle that edge and see if that color will lift, and I can keep my paint inside of there. So that's one way you can do that if you would like to. Now I'm going to switch sets because I don't have a good burnt sienna color in that palette. So I'm going to be using this one, and I'm going to be using this burnt sienna color right here. So let's see, what color am I down? I'm going to water it down. I want to start a little bit light to make sure I don't go too dark right away. And I'm going to be using that on my ginger kitty, and I'm going to be tapping in. So this is going to tone down a little bit of her orange and gold so she doesn't look so brightly colored. But I still want to see some of those bright colors on there, so I don't want to cover it all up, but I want to add this toning layer on top. And there she is, kind of toning down, so you can kind of see how that brings her together. Let's add some on her tail. Tap, tap, tap. Let's pick up a little bit more of that color. I'm adding about the same amount of water to this layer as I did when I first started. And the really interesting thing about watercolor too is that you still see some of those original colors that are going to be shining through. So because it's transparent, translucent, it's always going to affect what's underneath there is going to affect what you put on top. So, but that's kind of the cool thing about watercolor that's different than acrylic paint, where acrylic paint is usually far more opaque. You don't have that translucentness to it, unless of course you're adding glaze or some sort of other element to it. Okay, let's see what Ginger Kitty looks like. I think she's kind of looking cute. All right, we'll let her be. Now let's go ahead and add some red to this scarf. So I'm going to be choosing this red here, kind of in the cadmium color, light is what it's called. It's kind of an orangish red, and I'm going to be adding a little bit of water to it. So this is mixed to about, maybe about milk consistency is what I'm mixing it to. And I'm going to go ahead and brush this color in. Now, because this is going to be all the same color, I can still come in. Let's add this color in. So this is, I'm putting it on wet paint on dry paper. So that's a wet paint on a dry paper. So my color should stay put. It's not going to blossom as much as what if I'm on a wet paper and add my color onto it. Then my color is going to more flow out. This is going to be a little bit more exact. So I can come into this dry area, add my wet paint. Oops, I forgot to add, oh, that's the sweater color. Okay, I was thinking I forgot to add a little bit. Okay, so now my area is wet, and I wanted to show you this just a tiny bit. You can see where it bled into her face just a little bit because my color on my kitty wasn't quite dry. That's going to go up there. Now I'm just going to let that dry and not pay too much attention to it. But I'm going to come in with my red though, and I'm going to be adding just a little bit less water to this, more pigment. And I'm going to come in and lay in a shadow area here. This is going to be darker back here because this is like the scarf going behind them. This color here would be darker because it's that little, this is going to be the lightest part because it's laying in the front. Now this is wet paint, and there's a possibility it could flow into that one, but I'm going to just let this kind of flow and do its own thing and create its blooming patterns on its own. So because there's that moisture inside, I've come in with my pigment, laid it in. It's going to be a little bit free flowing. And let's see if I can't add a little bit to this sides too, but around the edges. And we can even add a little bit more darker shadow yet. If I come in and I want to darken it more, I can add another layer. So let's let that dry and see what we come up with. So because this area is so wet, I can't work on my kitty face or on this sweater or in those areas there. I want to pop down and do a different area. So I'm going to pick up this purple, this violet color here, and that's what I'm going to be doing my little kitty sweater in. I have some areas I can paint in. Okay, so let's do this. Whoop, I want to kind of water this down. I want to definitely start light with this color. It's a pretty potent color. I can check my color here. I can dab it to make sure I don't have too much color. I can rinse my brush out, make sure it's clean water. Come in, then pick it up. That will help too, so it's not so strong. And I'm going to come in and add just a little bit of color to begin with on my kitty area. Okay. Oh, I forgot this part of my scarf. Okay, let's go ahead and lay a little bit more of this here. Okay, I better finish up that scarf area. Okay. Let's add that same red that I added in the scarf. Let's bring that color down here for the front part of the pocket. When I'm creating my little paintings or drawings, what I like to do is spread my color around. So if I use some color combination in one area, I like to use it in a different area too. So if you're painting a different color than mine, you could always look at, where are your colors and where are you wanting to add them. Oops, I forgot to put the cuffs on this little kitty. He needs some cuffs on this little kitty area. I'll have to check my tracer to make sure I have them on there. Oh, I do on the tracer, I just didn't trace it. Let's go ahead and add some stripes here. I'm just going to use my brush. This is a number 6. It's not the tiniest of lines, but it will work just fine for this area. And I created a little stripe pattern here on the sweater. Now, if you like to do mixed media, you could always do this little treatment in those areas inside. You could do that in a marker if you decided. I did her heart and that orangey ginger cat color. Okay, I'm gonna pick up just a tiny bit of red, maybe tap that in there just to give that heart a little bit more depth so it's not so flat. And I'm doing it while my color is wet, so it'll be able to maybe blend a little bit. Now this set here has a neon color, a neon pink. It has some neon colors in it, and I'm going to be using that for the outside of her little pockets here. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of a fun color. It's nice and bright. And I'm going to carry some of that neon over here to this one. And let those dry. Now I'm going to be doing the inside of this little coat or her little sweater, this guy. I'm going to do those in the pink. So I'm going to take a light pink color and I'm going to wash some of this color of the pink over the sweater. And again, this is my lightest, brightest color. And I'm just going to float that in. I'm going to leave some white showing. It gives me some room if I need to add a little bit more color. I always can. Let's see, add a little bit here. A bit darker shadow. Maybe I will bump over a color and add that in while I'm working on that. So I can come in and add just maybe a darker shadow. Give it some depth so it's not just a flat color. So this would be definitely a shadow part back here. So I can add a little bit more color there. And let's let that dry and see what happens. Now let's come up here and finish this purple here. Those areas should be pretty dry. Let's add a little bit more purple. Okay, now you can notice I added a lot more color in this one, unintentionally. If I feel like I need to really lighten it, I could come back in, take my brush, give it a squeeze, come back in and tap, and that's going to be able to lift some of that color. So if I feel like I got too dark and I want to give myself a little bit of room so I don't have to be locked into that darker purple, I can do it. I can lift my color that way. Let's add a little bit of darker color here. These ones got a little bit too light. Okay, now I want to leave some space. I need to make sure I have enough contrast in between. This is the rims of my sweaters and this is the front part of my sweater. So I want to be able to leave some room. So I'm going to let that dry and I want some contrast in between this and that, even though they're the same color. So I want to make sure I have enough space to be able to add a little bit of space in there. I'm going to pick up our contrast. Let's pick up some of this pink, dab this in to the ears. I gave them a little pink nose. And inside of their mouth, I gave them a little bit of pink there. Okay, cute. All right, let's add, I'm liking that sweater, or the scarf. I'm thinking I'm gonna add a little bit darker red. So I'm gonna come over and mix up my red, probably this time a little bit more pigment and a little less water. And because this one needs to be darker. So I needed to make it darker because this one is in front. So I wanna make sure I'm making this one darker. A little bit more darkness here to get the contrast. You need to have contrast in your paintings. Otherwise, everything looks really flat. A good way to check your contrast is take a photo of your work in black and white and then see if you have enough contrast. That's when it's going to really show up a lot, is when you can take it in black and white and then take a look at it and see if there's enough contrast. It's a good way to see if your painting really does have enough contrast, and it's really gonna make a difference in the look of your pictures if you really checked that contrast. Okay, I'm thinking I wanna darken up this little part here because it dried fairly light. So I wanna make sure I'm boosting that color up. We'll let that dry and I'll put some pink in there too. Okay, they're coming together. Now I did get quite a bit of purple inside of my heart. I'm gonna come and clean my brush and make sure it's nice and clean, kind of a little damp. And I'm gonna just tickle this edge a little bit and see if I can't pull up some of that purple. Then I won't have so much purple in there. And then I'm going to be laying in another shade of, let's add a little bit of that brighter, let's add a little bit of that bright orange, yellow. See if we can't brighten that up. Okay, that looks good. I like that. That looks good. Well, we're almost done. Now let's take some of those colors that we've been using in the background or on the front here, and let's put some of those in with the hearts. So I'm just going to simply add some of the colors. So the red, the pink, and I did a little bit of the purple too. Okay, let's add another one here. A little bit of purple. Thinking I want to add, just float in another one so I have, because I don't have three, I'm going to add another third purple one here just to balance out my colors. Okay, there we go. You can add as many as you like. This one got a little dark. Let's see if I can't lift some of that color. That purple is a very potent color. So let's lift some of that color. All right, since I already have my purple already kind of mixed up off to here, the side with a lot more text or color in it, this pigment, I'm gonna add some purple stripes to the front, like the band of her sweater area here. Let's add a few here. And then to add a little bit of texture to her sweater, let's go ahead and lighten it. Let's add a little bit more water to that purple. It could be similar to the coloration that I put on. Let's add a little bit more color here, even a little bit more water. That might be too strong. Let's see if I can't get that to lighten up a little bit. I just want a shade or like an indication of that sweater has some texture to it. So I'm not looking to have just a ton of line work. I just want it to look like it has a little bit of texture. Okay, let's add darkness to there. Okay, that looks cute. Cute, cute, cute. I think I'm going to pick up a little bit of the peach color. I have a little bit of peach here. Let's see if I can't put some of that in there. My brush might be a little dirty. Maybe to come to some clean water. I'm terrible about having a clean side of my water. I'm usually over mixing when I'm doing it. So I have my dirty water and my clean water, and then I end up with kind of a mess. But technically you should probably have an area where your color is clean or your water is clean. Let's add a little bit of pink here too. Okay, that's cute. Now these little kitties need some pink cheeks. So I'm gonna come in, make sure I have plenty of water in here. So I want a light shade. So I'm just gonna add some of that pink color, add enough water in there. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a tap here. And I'm gonna use the tip of my brush and I'm just going to tap, tap, tap irregularly where the cheeks might be. Okay, so I'm going to give this a tap now. So I'm going to offload my brush, and I'm going to be just squiggling that color around, and I want to have a broken color. So I don't want it to be just the solid pink. So hopefully you can kind of see how that's broken. It's not solid, and that's the look I'm kind of going for. I'm going to come over here and do the same thing to this kitty. Now she might need, if I can get this pink to show up, she might need a little bit of red added to her cheek. So we'll see. My colors are going to blend because I'm under blending that color or lifting that color underneath. So those oranges and that raw sienna color are going to get picked up now because it's wet. So it's going to blend in with my other areas. Now let's go ahead and add a background. I'm going to switch brushes. This time I'm going to switch to a bigger brush. If I can find my bigger brush. I thought I had it out already. Okay, hang on. I'm going to stop it. I got to find my big brush to do my background. Okay, so I wanted to pop up to a bigger size brush working on those backgrounds. And I'm going to come back into that pink color that I've been using. And I'm going to use that for my background. Now, watercolor is not permanent, so I don't want to spend a ton of time going right into and scrubbing on those areas where I have, because I could reactivate it and make it move around, especially now it hasn't had that much time to dry. So it is very kind of, it could react easily. So I'm turning my hand different directions. I'm not spending a lot of time. I didn't intentionally mean to go over that red heart, but we'll see what happens. I think it's gonna be fine. You can see how that red color is kind of bleeding out, which looks good, I think. Maybe it was an oops, but maybe it's a good oops. Okay, let's go right on in. I don't want to get too much water, which that was kind of a puddling that was happening there. So I went in, you can dry off your brush, pick some color up again, water, and not get too much of a puddle. Okay, let's come underneath here. Now, I'm also going to pick up just a tiny bit of that purple color. And let's lay that in. Well, it's all wet. So this is now becoming like a wet on wet. So my colors are going to blend together because my paper's wet, my paint's wet, and it's going to just kind of blend together. Now I do want to put a little bit more of a shadow or underneath my kitties to anchor them a little bit more. So I'm going to add just a tiny bit more purple down here to give it more of an anchoring, more of a shadow line underneath my cats, to make it anchored on my picture. So I'm going to add that on there. Okay, they're looking cute. We can't forget this spot here, which I did with my pink. So let's pick up a little bit of the pink. Oops. And add that in there. Okay, so I got too carried away with my color, so I can come in, wet my brush off, and then pick up a little bit of color. Okay. Now I'm going to let this dry just a tiny bit, and then I'm going to do a little bit of splittering and then come back and do the pen work for my kitties. I dried it just a little bit. I'm going to pick up some of that pink color, some of that neon pink color, and I'm going to do a little splitter splatter in there. And I wanted to dry it just a tiny bit before I did it because I don't want my color just to completely spread all the way out. And if it's wet, those little dots are just gonna melt all the way in. But I wanted to see some of the dots. So I'm using my brush and just tapping it. And that helps kind of allow me to get it where I want it to be. So if I get some on my face and I don't want it there, I can use a paper towel and then just tap it and remove it if I get some spots where I don't really want it. Okay, we're gonna give it another dry and I'll come right back. If you force dry your picture, it's going to want to curl, which mine did. So I would apply some heat to the back, and that does help flatten it a little bit. So I dry the front, dry the back, dry the front, and just rotate back and forth. Paper you can bend because it doesn't have a strong memory at all on it. So you can work your paper that way if you would like. Now I'm going to go ahead and use a 01 micron pen. It works perfect for these little drawings because the ink is permanent once it dries. And when I do my pen work, I like to do more of a sketch quality line. So I'm not tracing just a solid line around it. So I'm actually going past where my pencil marks are. So I'm just loosening up my line work and not doing exact. So for the eyes, I did those round circles, but I want to go ahead and put the dark part in. So I'm going to put my little circle in, but then I'm going to scribble in the center, and I want to make sure I leave a catch light. So all living things have catch lights. So that's that little white light in the eye. And I wanted it to look like it was looking down to this other kitty. So I want to make sure my eyes are on this part of my eye. If it's up high, it's going to be looking up. If it's down here, it's going to be looking down. And I wanted it to be looking that direction. So I got my one eye there. Let's go ahead and draw my next line here. Now when you get the tracer, those will have the marks of the eyes, so you can always take a look at it that way. You always have a reference of the one I drew as well. I'm going to give this little gal some eyebrows because kitties have crazy eyebrows where they're really got those little big old whiskers on there on their eyebrows. Let's give a little muzzle action here. Now let's go ahead and give this one some nice big whiskers. And I'm just doing that stroke mark where I'm starting from the inside and pulling it out. You can add the little dots on there if you would like to add that little quality. Okay, so it's got a real cute look. I'm going to do the little insides of her ears too. And by doing this little loose little line, it kind of gives that look of some like fur as well. So that's that look there. Let's come in and add that line. So when I'm doing this, I kind of call it like scribbling, where I'm going past or even doubling up my line so it's not like perfect. Hear that noise, it's my husband coming home from work and the garage door is opening. Okay, there we go. Long whiskers. Oh, look at how cute she's looking, coming together really nicely. Do the insides here. Now for Ginger Kitty, I'm also going to do some, and for this little guy too, I'm going to be doing some little tail marks on the tail. So I'm going to be coming in and doing little scribbly bits to make it look like they're little tiger stripes on this little guy. And we'll just add these little lines coming past. Oh, I forgot to add a little bit of pink there. I'm going to have to come back in and add that area. It seems like I always have one area that I forget to do. And it's usually some little small area I don't recognize until the end. And I think to myself, how did I miss that area? But I've missed it, so I will come back in and add the details on there. So you can kind of see how I'm not necessarily doing super curvy lines and actually intentionally coming in and maybe doing some more angular lines just to loosen up my drawing. Okay, and so this one I ended up putting an X and an O right in the heart as a little extra pattern. So X, O, X, O, cute. I'm going to be adding another pen work on here. I have some neon gel pens that I'm going to be using, and so I'm going to be adding some bright neon pink onto these little guys too. Okay, so let's add a little bit more. I think that looks good. Oh, I did add a little bit of stitch mark around the heart here to make it look like it's attached some way. Cute, 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 as we say in Painting Crafty. All right, let's use a little bit of this neon gel pen. The Jelly Roll pens come in a whole bunch of different colors. This is neon pink. It's one of my favorite ones to use. I have a set of these that I use a lot in my mixed media items, and they're just fun. They're a nice size. It's nice to change the tips and have different line quality in your drawings or your paintings. And if you enjoy doing mixed media, that's one really great way is to add some different line qualities. I'm going to add just a dark shot area to his nose to one side, a darker area, and just a little bit darker in there. Let's add a few little lines on the pockets here. So let's add some pattern coming in. That. that. And let's carry that pattern, that little line pattern, over here as well. Okay, I'm going to be adding some white dots. I have this white jelly roll pen too. Now, usually I use my Uniball pen, which I like. The jelly roll isn't as white, as bright a white as my Uniball pen, but that works good for, I think, this little one. Mostly I do use my Uniball pen, but I have this one, so I was like, I need to use that more often just to create a little different look. I like having a bright white, but sometimes you don't want everything bright white. Okay, so let's leave it that way. Now to add another line of line work to be a little bit lighter line work, I'm going to be using this China marker in white. It's another one of my go-tos when doing mixed media. Now this time I remembered to put it on after I do my ink work. Because this is waxy like a crayon, you're not going to be able to go over it very easily with any pen afterwards. So if you want to use this one, use it before or after you do your pen work. So this is one of those ones you add after because you can't really mark on it afterwards. I'm going to come in and do a little twisting and turning in my background too, just to add a little bit more texture. So I'm twisting and turning. This is going to be a very subtle pattern, and it might not even show up on the camera, but when you're seeing my piece, you're going to be able to notice it when you're looking at it in person, and it just adds a little bit more texture. I'm a texture girl, so I love to add a little bit of texture to my pieces. Oh, these little characters are super cute. All right, one last thing to add. I'm going to be using my pen here, and I'm going to just do a little loose pattern in the background. A little bit of X, a bit of X and O's, maybe even a little bit of like sewing lines. Now you can see right there, I have a little bit of that white pen that was there, so you can't see my lines. So perhaps I should have done this before I use my Sharpie marker because it's interfering with how well my lines are going to be drawn on the edges. Okay, do as I say, not as I do. Can make some X's on the lines here. Okay, let's come up. And I just wanted to add this little bit of a border. It's always fun to add or I find it fun anyway, to add a little bit of border on there. Okay, and you should always sign your work when you get done. So this is a good spot here next to my kitty. So we're going to go ahead and sign it there. Well, I think it's super cute. Hopefully you learned a few things, and you will try it to see if you want to complete one. And again, if you would like to have the tracer, you can always click that in the description for the tracers, and you can just print it off on your printer and then use a light box. That's what works the best for tracing, is a light box, or you can put it up on your windows as well. But that is it, my friends, for tonight, and thanks for hanging out with me tonight, and hopefully you'll come back next time and when I do a draw along, and next time you will draw right along with me. Thanks everyone. Have a good evening. Bye now.